Hey, what's up, guys? Just doing a quick video talking about the day that I realized that food matters when it comes to Crohn's disease and colitis, and that your diet actually matters in your disease and controlling, your autoimmune symptoms. That was actually the aha moment that made me realize, very concisely, that it does. And I know that everybody's situation is going to be different in regards to how they were diagnosed. I know when I was diagnosed, my GI doc, when he sat me down, he went over the spiel, and I have a video talking about the day that I went and spoke with him. But I actually asked him, I said, does diet matter? Because I was looking online, I was trying to, look and see, I was looking for a solution. So yeah, I found some people talking about diets that improve their symptoms, and other people saying it didn't matter. But what I noticed at that time is the people that said that diet matters were the people that were taking more of a natural approach, so using natural supplements and trying just like a natural kind of diet. And then the people that were against diet, it seems like they were doing more of the allopathic model, so they were doing drugs and surgeries. So just to decipher that. But he said point blank to me that diet doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference on what you eat. It's not going to control the outcome. And he says it's also not really it's not going to be a good tool to manage symptoms. He said that he has heard from some people that spicy foods and dairy can cause issues, but that he didn't really elaborate much beyond that. It's not like he recommended me with a specific diet or anything. So back to my story. Early on in my healing journey, I owned a lawn care company. So at that time, we were working 12 to 14 hour days, long days in the heat. I had a few guys working for me, and we were doing lawn care and landscaping. So it was pretty busy, and it was pretty labor intensive work. So I'd eat in the morning. So I'd have a small bite in the morning, and then I'd have some kind of lunch around noon. But because I didn't actually have my IBD in check, I was always going to the bathroom after I ate. So I was going to the bathroom 5 to 10 times during my work day. So in the middle of a job, having to leave to go to the bathroom, not very convenient or very productive. So it's not like I could do that for very long. And I was thinking about, I got to find some kind of solution, because it's not like I can put a porta potty in the back of my truck and haul it around. That just wasn't going to work. So eventually what I did is I went to Home Depot and I grabbed a 5-gallon pail, like an orange Home Depot pail. I put that in the back of my truck, and I pretty much made a little makeshift toilet. I filled it up with about 1/4 to 1/3 of water, and I put the lid on. So when I had to use the bathroom, I just went in the back seat and I took a poop. When I was done, threw the toilet paper there, it's submerged in the water, just like a toilet at home, put the lid back on, didn't worry about smell, didn't worry about mess or anything. It worked out perfect. And it's funny because I had this Ford Ranger. It was a 2000 Ford Ranger. It was a 2-door, and it had the doors that flip open along with these bench seats that fold down. So I'd fold the seats up, and there was actually quite a bit of room in there. So nobody would see me, and I could do my business. It made my business a lot more productive, didn't take me off the job site, and it worked out perfectly. Obviously, I didn't want to do that long term, but it worked in the beginning. I found it pretty good. But then there was a day I remember I decided not to bring a lunch, and I was probably in a rush or something. And I'm like, I'm not going to cook. I don't feel like cooking anything. I'm just not going to bring a lunch. I'm not going to eat. And then what I noticed is I didn't have lunch, didn't have breakfast. I noticed that I didn't have any bowel movements, no liquid bowel movements, nor did I have any pain, right? Because it's not just about the fact that I wasn't going to the bathroom, because it made sense. I didn't eat anything, so there was no need to go to the bathroom. But I noticed that my symptoms decreased. So my cramps, I still had energy even though I was doing physical work. No cramps, and overall I felt really good. So something inside of me is saying, hey, you know what? Input equals output. What goes in, must come out kind of thing. I was like, this is weird, but I was definitely paying attention to it. And then the next day I decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to try this again. Did it again. The same thing. I felt good. Almost like minimal amounts of symptoms. So what I started doing is I just adopted that system early on. Wasn't eating during the day, and as soon as I got home from my work, so between 6 and 8 p.m. depending on the work day, I'd eat my dinner, and then I'd spend a few hours shit my brains out, But I pretty much finished pooping, rid my body of all of its contents right before I was ready to go to bed. Have a good sleep, didn't wake up during the night to have to go to the bathroom. Wake up, and get my day started. It worked. Not a perfect system, but it worked. You know, I know for a lot of us, it's not like we have it figured out, and I didn't have it figured out. I just had I had a system that worked that allowed me to sort of have this normal life, and yeah. But it was at that point that I realized input equals output. If I wasn't eating, I wasn't having symptoms. But eventually I found a diet. So I adopted, at that time it was an SCD diet. It was a very simple version of the SCD diet. So I tweaked it and I could live a normal life. Like for the most part, get up every day, and I knew as long as I stayed to that pretty boring diet, I could get by and I could live a somewhat normal life. Again, boring. Did I still have some symptoms? Yeah, I did. But at least I had some normalcy to live my life and be able to like enjoy some things. And when I say enjoy things, I'm not talking about food, but whether it's hanging out with some buddies and doing stuff like that, there was a little bit of normalcy there. And eventually through trial and error, I phased out of that diet into a few other diets and trying different things. I guess you could say I failed and tweaked forward. I was able to achieve remission. You know, I was able to feel good, and I've been in remission for a few years, over a decade. So I don't know if it's 12 or 13 years at this point. But back to my main message, diet absolutely matters. If you're sitting here wondering, does it actually matter? It 100% matters. So if you haven't addressed your diet yet and you're really stressed about symptoms, that has got to be one of your top priorities. You have to get that. You have to like look at doing that, implementing some sort of diet strategy. Again, input equals output. And the majority of your input comes from the foods you're eating, comes from the foods that you're putting in your body, whether it's a supplement form or if it's food. But the funny thing is, the majority of the GI docs out there say that diet doesn't matter. And I'm not saying all of them, because some do, and it slowly seems to be changing, especially when it comes to functional medicine, because functional medicine, definitely those practitioners, they do say, yeah, diet matters, and they even have a few phases of the different diets or a few different diet strategies that they use. So they at least do that. But for the most part of the allopathic model, they're saying that diet doesn't matter. But you know what I find very ironic when it comes to autoimmune disease? Let's take celiac disease. So celiac disease is an autoimmune condition, but it has a pretty simple fix. Remove the gluten and you can live a pretty normal life. It's pretty simple. It's funny that thought process isn't applied to other autoimmune diseases, whether it's Crohn's disease, colitis, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis. Why wouldn't they say, if they already have a direct link to food changing the outcome of an autoimmune disease, don't you think it's at least worth studying that correlation? But unfortunately, I don't have the most positive things to say about about most aspects of the allopathic medical system. And I think what happens is, I think it's, for the most part, their system is very backwards. You know, they treat symptoms and not underlying conditions. So what they do is they separate the symptoms and they label them as different diseases. So they say, you have an IBD, and they separate that even further, saying you have Crohn's disease if you're inflamed here, and you have colitis if you're inflamed here. So they separate those. And then if you have, let's say, rheumatoid arthritis, that means that your muscle tissue is inflamed. Or if you have your thyroid tissue is inflamed, it would be Hashimoto's, and the list goes on and on and on. So I think that their AI model, so their autoimmune model of just like treating symptoms and not the underlying conditions, I think that that's very wrong. And I think that maybe in years' time, we'll realize that they were very wrong. And I'll actually do a video on that, because I think I have a pretty good theory, or at least a pretty simple explanation that makes a lot of sense. And I'll do a video in the near future explaining that. But I think questions for you guys, as I'm really curious, is, were you told by your GI doc or your diagnosing doc that diet matters? Did they say it matters, or did they say that it didn't matter? And did they recommend any options? Did they have any options and saying, or at least any pointers in regards to diet, besides avoid spicy food and don't consume dairy? But the takeaway point of this video is that diet matters. Input equals output. And I can say from everyone that I've encountered that's achieved long-term remission, they got there through diet. being the majority of their strategy to get better. So, or their primary focus. So take that very strongly, because if you don't address your diet, there's no way that you're going to be able to achieve long-term remission doing anything else. And yeah, there's a lot of hacks, and I'll explain little hacks that you can get to minimize symptoms, because there's supplements that you can take that will reduce symptoms. But if you're looking for sustained long-term remission where you can feel good for a decade, that involves diet strategy, and there's no getting around that. Like, I can get away with eating some crappy food for a few days, a week, 2 weeks, but you let that slide too much longer and the symptoms will come back. I have no doubt that if I went off the handle for months at a time, would my autoimmune symptoms come back? No doubt, because diet is what keeps me in long-term remission. It keeps me feeling awesome, keeps me having energy. So definitely something you want to address. And to think about it in the most simple terms, it's like every single item of food that you consume, it has a specific hormonal reaction. It's everything. And that also goes, when you're consuming food, some foods can trigger inflammation. Others don't. Not eating also triggers hormones. So like I said, when I wasn't eating, that affected my hormones. So whether that affects your insulin levels and your glucose levels that are very related to inflammatory markers, hey, if you can normalize your insulin and your glucose, hey, all of a sudden you're like, I feel better. I have less symptoms. It's very, very tied to hormones. And you got to think that every single piece of food that you put in your body is going to have some kind of effect. And when you're early on, that effect is a lot more heightened, that food affects your body. Hey, the longer you go of feeling awesome, so if you achieve remission and you get to be a year, 2 years, you're going to be able to tolerate a lot more foods. You're going to be able to have some sugar. You're going to be able to have a bunch of things that you couldn't have when you were in more of a flare state that would set you off. But that's just going through that process. So pick a diet that optimizes and improves hormones. And I think that would probably primarily be done through lower carb and higher fat diets. And I'm going to focus on the lower carb there, because it definitely seems to be related to overconsumption of a lot of carbs causes a lot of issues. And I think, again, I've talked about this in other videos, any diet that positively affects glucose and insulin is usually going to optimize hormones, and it's going to reduce autoimmune symptoms. And yeah, my rant for the day is over. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you guys have any questions or you want to reach out, let me know, and make sure to answer the question, because really all about creating some dialogue here so that we can make some improvement. And I want to offer you guys the best value in you guys watching these videos. Thanks again. Peace. I appreciate it.
Are you tired of feeling crappy? Get my free healing guide. Tips, tweaks, and hacks. Click the description for more information.